I never planned to tell this story, because in the armed forces, love is not written in reports and betrayal is often classified. Have you ever trusted someone with your life, only to realize they were using your heart as a step toward power? Would you stay silent to survive, or speak the truth and lose everything? My name is Evelyn. I was a soldier. I loved a man in uniform, and I learned that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's ambition. This is my story. If you're ready to hear what really happens behind medals and smiles, subscribe to this channel, because some truths were never meant to stay buried. The first thing they teach you in the armed forces is how to survive. The second thing they never teach you is how to love without losing yourself. I met Daniel Reed in a place where love wasn't supposed to exist. We were deployed to a forward operating base that didn't appear on most maps, a stretch of dust and concrete, surrounded by silence and distant gunfire. Days blurred into nights, names blurred into ranks. You learn to recognize people not by their smiles, but by the sound of their boots and the way they held their weapon. Daniel was calm under pressure. Too calm. While others panicked, he calculated. While others reacted, he planned. That was what drew me to him first. Not his face, not his voice, but the way he never seemed afraid. Fearless men are dangerous. I learned that too late. We were in the same tactical unit, which meant trust wasn't optional. When you move as a team, your life is always in someone else's hands. His life was in mine. Mine was in his. That kind of intimacy changes you faster than any romance ever could. At first, our connection was unspoken. Shared glances during briefings. A hand lingering too long when passing equipment. Conversations that began with strategy and ended with silence that felt heavy, charged. One night, after a patrol that went wrong, we sat outside the barracks while the generators hummed behind us. The sky was black, torn open by stars. "Do you ever think about life after this?" he asked. I laughed. "After this doesn't exist." He looked at me then, not like a fellow soldier, but like a man who was already imagining a future. "It does," he said quietly. "We just have to survive long enough." That was how it started. No promises, no declarations, just survival turning into something warmer, something human. In war, affection becomes a rebellion. We never spoke about love out loud. We didn't need to. It was there in the way he checked my gear before missions, even when it wasn't his responsibility. In the way I watched his blind spots without being asked. In the way we always ended up sitting next to each other, no matter how the room filled. And eventually, one night, it crossed the line. There was no dramatic kiss, no music, just exhaustion, adrenaline, and the realization that we were alive right now, and tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. After that, there was no going back. Still, we were careful. The military doesn't forgive distractions, especially not emotional ones. Relationships inside a unit were tolerated only if they didn't interfere with performance. And Daniel cared deeply about how things looked. That should have been my warning. Weeks passed, missions stacked on top of missions. Casualties were mentioned in briefings with the same tone used for weather updates. Somewhere along the way, Daniel started talking about the future again. "After the next operation," he said one evening, his voice low, "the big one, when this is done." "You always say that." "This time I mean it," he replied. "After this mission, I want something real. No more hiding." I remember the way my chest tightened. Hope is a dangerous thing in uniform. "What does real mean to you?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "You, me, a life where we don't have to look over our shoulders." I believed him. The mission he was talking about was classified even within the unit. We were told only what we needed to know, and even that came in fragments. High risk, limited visibility, no margin for error, the kind of operation that could end careers or lives. Daniel was designated as team lead. That surprised some people. It didn't surprise him. On the morning of deployment, he looked confident, composed. Too composed. I watched him study the map, trace routes with his finger, nod as if everything was already under control. "Anything you want to say before we move?" I asked quietly. He smiled. "Just trust me." I did. The operation started smoothly. Too smoothly. We advanced through hostile terrain under radio silence. following the plan Daniel had briefed. But plans don't survive contact with reality. They fracture. They bleed. Halfway through, new intel came in, late incomplete. Enemy movement where there shouldn't have been any. I saw the flaw immediately. The route Daniel chose exposed our rear. "Daniel," I said into the comms, "we need to reroute. This path." "Negative," he cut in. "Stick to the plan." "Sir, the drone feed." I said, "Stick to the plan." There was hesitation in the team. Seconds stretched. Then the ambush hit. Gunfire erupted from the left flank. Chaos followed. Training took over. We moved, returned fire, took cover. Somewhere in the noise, someone screamed. Daniel froze. Just for a moment. But in combat, a moment is enough to kill you. I saw him standing exposed, trying to process what was happening. Without thinking, I broke formation and pulled him behind cover as rounds struck the ground where he had been standing. "Move!" I shouted. He did. Too late for one of our men. By the time extraction arrived, the mission was technically complete. The target was neutralized. But one of ours lay zipped in black plastic, his name already being rewritten as a necessary loss. Back at base, the debrief was short. Clean. Sanitized. Daniel spoke with confidence. He described decisions he hadn't made, risks he hadn't taken, adjustments he hadn't ordered. His version of events painted him as decisive, adaptive, a leader under fire. No one questioned him. I waited for him to correct the record, to mention the hesitation, the mistake, the life lost because of it. He didn't. Later that night, I confronted him. "You froze," I said. "You know you did." He looked tired. "It doesn't matter." "It does," I replied. "Someone died." His jaw tightened. "This is how it works, Evelyn. We can't afford doubt in the report. The mission succeeded." "At what cost?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen to me. If this goes down as a failure, it affects everyone. Careers. Futures. Our future." There it was. The word again. "You promised," I said. "You said after this mission." "And we still will," he interrupted. "This changes nothing." It changed everything. Days later, the official report was released. Daniel's name was praised, his leadership highlighted, a recommendation for advancement quietly attached. Mine wasn't mentioned. Neither was the mistake. Neither was the man who died. Daniel avoided me after that. Not completely, just enough to create distance. When I asked about us, he said things like "not now" and "later," and "you know how complicated this is." Complicated. That was the word people used when they didn't want to say the truth. The truth was simpler. I had saved his life, and he had chosen himself. On the night before his formal recognition, I watched him stand in front of the mirror, adjusting his uniform. He looked proud, untouched. "You still trust me, right?" he asked casually. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say I saw him clearly now. Instead, I said nothing. Because in the armed forces, silence is sometimes the first act of survival. And sometimes it's the beginning of war. They say coming home is the easy part. The truth is the battlefield doesn't end when the gunfire stops. It just changes shape. When our unit rotated back, the air felt different. Quieter. Cleaner. Applause replaced explosions. Cameras replaced night vision goggles. We were welcomed as survivors, not witnesses. Daniel thrived in that environment. At first, nothing seemed wrong. He walked taller, spoke less, listened more, especially when senior officers entered the room. His name started appearing in places it hadn't before. Internal briefings, recommendation lists, conversations that stopped when I walked in. I told myself I was imagining it. Trauma does that to you. It turns patterns into paranoia. But patterns don't send invitations. The first real distance came the night I suggested we finally really talk about what came next. "Not here," he said, glancing around the base bar. "People watch." "They always watch," I replied. "That never stopped us before." He sighed, the kind of sigh meant to sound patient, but carried irritation underneath. "Things are different now." Different. Another word that hides truth instead of revealing it. He started canceling plans. showing up late, leaving early. When I asked where he'd been, the answers were vague but polished. Briefings, meetings, protocol. Protocol doesn't smell like unfamiliar perfume. I noticed a change in the way others treated me, too. Conversations cooled. Doors that used to open, now, closed quietly. A superior officer suggested I consider a temporary reassignment, a desk position away from operations. For your well-being, he said. I knew what it meant. Containment. Then the reassignment became official. No explanation. No incident report. Just an order stamped and signed by people who had never seen me under fire. I was moved to a different wing, a different schedule, a different reality. Daniel didn't protest. That hurt more than the transfer itself. I confronted him outside headquarters, where flags fluttered and speeches were rehearsed. You knew about this, I said. He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. It's not permanent, he replied carefully. It's just timing. My career is not a scheduling issue, I snapped. He lowered his voice. You're too close to this. To me. To what happened. They think space will help. They, I repeated. Or you. His eyes flickered. Just for a second. I'm trying to protect what we have, he said. I laughed then. A short, sharp sound that startled even me. By pushing me out of your life? That's not what this is. It looks exactly like it. Weeks passed. We barely spoke. When we did, every word felt measured, like testimony instead of conversation. The warmth was gone. In its place stood something colder, calculation. And then the invitation arrived. A thick envelope, heavy paper, gold lettering. Daniel Reed and Victoria Hale. Request the pleasure of your company. I didn't read the rest. Victoria Hale, the name everyone knew. The general's daughter. Educated, polished, untouchable. I sat on my bunk for a long time, holding that envelope like it was evidence from a crime scene. Somewhere deep inside, something finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I confronted him that night. He didn't pretend anymore. It wasn't planned, he said. At first. At first. I echoed. She understands the world I'm in, he continued. The expectations. The responsibilities. And I don't. My voice was steady, which surprised me. You're complicated, he replied. There it was. The final verdict. You promised me, I said quietly. After the mission. I meant it then. And now. Now things are different. Always different. Always changing, except the outcome. Did you ever love me? I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. I cared about you, he said. But this is bigger than us. No, I corrected him. This is bigger than me. He looked relieved, as if I had made it easier for him. That night I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because grief hadn't caught up to betrayal yet. I felt hollow, like a structure stripped of its foundation, but still standing. The wedding moved fast. Military efficiency. Political necessity. Smiles rehearsed. Photos staged. Daniel rose with it. He received formal recognition for the mission. A metal pin to his chest by the same hands that had signed my reassignment. His name was spoken with pride. His story told without cracks. I watched from the back of the room. No one noticed me. That was intentional. After the ceremony, someone approached me, a junior officer I barely knew. Must be strange, he said awkwardly. Seeing him like that. Seeing who? I asked. He hesitated. Daniel. I mean, Captain Reed. Captain. The title tasted bitter. Yes, I replied. Strange. Later that evening, alone in my quarters, I finally opened the envelope. The invitation wasn't just an announcement. It was a statement, a declaration of alignment, of power, of replacement. I wasn't the woman he loved anymore. I was the woman he outgrew, or so he thought. What Daniel didn't realize was that pushing me aside didn't erase me from the story. It moved me closer to the margins where things are easier to see. With distance came clarity. I began reviewing what I had avoided before. The mission logs, the timestamps, the discrepancies. I noticed how quickly Daniel's version of events had been accepted, how neatly responsibility had shifted. How silence had been rewarded. I also noticed something else. The man who died, the one zipped into black plastic, had a sister. She had filed a complaint. It went nowhere. Another soldier had requested a review. His request was denied. Patterns. I wasn't alone in what I had lost. I had just lost it more quietly. One evening, I ran into Daniel by chance. He looked satisfied, settled. His ring caught the light. "How are you holding up?" he asked, as if we were old colleagues. "I'm learning," I said. "Learning what?" "How things really work." He smiled politely. "Good. That will help you move on." Move on. That was the moment I understood something fundamental. Daniel believed the story was over. He believed love had been replaced by position, that the past had been sealed with medals and vows, that silence was permanent. He was wrong, because silence isn't empty. It's a space where memory sharpens, where truth waits, where names are written down and not forgotten. And as I watched him walk away, confident, protected, admired, I made a decision that felt colder than anger and steadier than grief. I would not beg. I would not expose myself recklessly, and I would not disappear quietly. If Daniel had chosen power over love, then I would learn the language of power too. Not to join it, but to dismantle it, one truth at a time. Because in war, betrayal isn't always committed by enemies. Sometimes it sleeps beside you, promises you a future, and leaves you behind with nothing but memory and time. And time, I was beginning to understand, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Silence doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in layers. At first, it was procedural. Meetings I was no longer invited to. Briefings rescheduled without notice. My access card stopped opening certain doors. When I asked, the answers were polite, rehearsed. Temporary. Administrative. For your protection. Protection from what? The truth? I learned quickly that in the armed forces, silence isn't imposed with threats. It's imposed with isolation. You're not punished loudly. You're simply erased from relevance. Daniel's name, meanwhile, kept rising. Captain Reed was now a reference point. A success story. His wedding photos circulated internally, accompanied by congratulations from officers who had never known him before, but already trusted him. Trust flows upward. I was summoned to a review panel 3 weeks after the wedding. 3 officers. Neutral expressions. No accusations, just concern. "You've been under significant emotional strain," one of them said. "We want to make sure you're fit for continued service," another added. They spoke as if my grief were a malfunction. They asked about my relationship with Daniel, how close we had been, whether I felt resentment, whether I believed my judgment might have been affected during the mission. The questions weren't about my well-being. They were about credibility. I answered carefully, truthfully, but without emotion. I described the mission as it had been reported, not as it had happened. I watched their pens move. I felt the walls closing in. When the panel ended, they thanked me for my cooperation. 2 days later, my operational clearance was suspended. No explanation, no appeal. That was the moment I understood. Speaking would not save me. It would destroy me. So I stopped speaking. Outwardly, I complied. I did my desk work. I followed orders. I smiled when required. I became invisible. Inwardly, something else was happening. Silence creates space, and space allows observation. With my clearance limited, I had time, something soldiers are rarely given. I used it to read old reports, archived logs, training manuals, anything that taught me how information moved through the system and how it was buried. I noticed how certain names appeared repeatedly in redacted files, how timelines bent slightly around particular officers, how some missions were successful despite impossible odds. Daniel wasn't an exception. He was a pattern. I reached out quietly, not to accuse, but to listen. The sister of the fallen soldier agreed to meet me off base. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She spoke with the exhaustion of someone who had already tried everything. They told me it was classified, she said, that knowing more wouldn't bring him back. What would bring him back? I asked. She looked at me then, Someone telling the truth. Another name joined my list. A former operator, now discharged, responded to an encrypted message I sent anonymously. He had been on a different mission, different time, same outcome. They needed someone to blame, he said, and someone to promote. I didn't record these conversations. I didn't take notes digitally. I memorized. I mapped connections in my head like routes through hostile terrain. Daniel, meanwhile, began preparing for his next step. A promotion ceremony was announced. Public. Symbolic. Televised internally. His face appeared on internal banners, alongside words like leadership and integrity. Integrity. The word echoed bitterly. He approached me once during this time. Found me in the corridor outside my temporary office. "You've been quiet," he said. "I've been busy," I replied. "With what?" "Learning." He smiled faintly. "That sounds ominous." "It's not," I said. "It's necessary." He studied me for a moment, as if searching for something familiar. Whatever he saw reassured him. "You should let go," he said. "Holding on only hurts you." I almost laughed. "I already let go," I replied. "That's why I'm still standing." He nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then we can both move forward." As he walked away, I realized something chilling. Daniel truly believed he was safe. The system had taught him that silence meant surrender. He had never considered it could mean preparation. The final piece came unexpectedly. An internal memo circulated briefly before being pulled. A mistake, a timing error, but I saw it. A discrepancy between drone footage timestamps and Daniel's after-action report. Small, technical, easy to overlook, unless you were looking. I requested access through official channels. It was denied, so I waited, because timing, like truth, is everything. The day of the ceremony approached. Speeches were drafted, medals polished, invitations sent. Daniel would stand in front of cameras and be elevated, officially, irrevocably, unless the story changed. I didn't need to destroy him. I only needed to let reality speak. Silence had taught me patience. Love had taught me where he was weakest. And betrayal had taught me this final lesson. Power doesn't fear anger. It fears exposure. As I watched the preparations unfold, I felt no rage, no sorrow, only clarity. The battlefield had changed, but I was still a soldier, and I was finally ready for the next phase of the war. The ceremony began exactly on time. Uniforms pressed, medals aligned, faces trained into expressions of pride and certainty. The kind of certainty that comes from believing the story has already been written. Daniel stood at the center of it all. Captain Reed, decorated, respected, protected. I watched from the edge of the hall, unnoticed, just another shadow among many. That was fine. Shadows see things clearly. The speech started the way these speeches always do. Words like honor, sacrifice, service. Applause followed on cue. Cameras moved with precision. Everything was controlled. Until it wasn't. The interruption didn't come from me. It came from the system itself. A screen behind the podium flickered. At first, no one reacted. Technical glitches happen. Then the image stabilized, drone footage, time-stamped, unedited. Silence fell like a held breath. The footage showed what the report never had. The hesitation, the wrong command, the moment when Daniel froze. It showed me pulling him to cover. It showed the soldier who didn't make it back. Someone tried to stop the feed. Too late. Then came the audio. Radio logs. Unaltered. Daniel's voice. Uncertain. Panicked. Followed by my warning. Followed by his dismissal. Followed by chaos. No narration. No commentary. Just truth. The room didn't erupt. It didn't explode into outrage or shouting. That's not how institutions react. It went quiet. That kind of quiet, the one that signals irreversible change. Daniel's face drained of color. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He knew. The ceremony ended without applause. Within hours, investigations were announced. Not quietly. Not internally. Too many eyes had seen. Too many ears had heard. Daniel was suspended pending review. Medals were frozen. His promotion dissolved before it could exist. Victoria Hale didn't stand by him. Power rarely marries weakness for long. I was called in the next morning. Different room, different tone. No accusations this time. No concern for my emotional stability. Just questions. Careful ones. I answered them all. I told the truth, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with precision. Dates, times, decisions, consequences. They listened. That alone felt like a victory. Weeks passed. The investigation concluded. Daniel was stripped of rank and discharged. Official statements spoke of procedural failures and shared responsibility, but his career was over. The system protected itself, but it did not save him. As for me, I was offered reinstatement, public acknowledgement, a quiet commendation, a chance to return to operations. I declined. That surprised them more than anything else. I've already fought my war, I said. And I had. Leaving the armed forces wasn't defeat. It was choice. For the first time since I put on a uniform, my life belonged entirely to me. I left with my record intact, my name cleared, my conscience clean, and something else I hadn't expected, peace. Not happiness in the cinematic sense. No triumphant music. No grand revenge satisfaction. Just peace. I met the sister of the fallen soldier one last time. I told her what had happened. I told her his death was finally acknowledged, not erased, not hidden. She held my hands and cried. That mattered more than any medal. Months later, I began working with an organization that supported whistleblowers inside rigid institutions, military, police, intelligence, people who had seen too much and been told to forget. I didn't speak loudly. I didn't seek attention. I listened, and when necessary, I taught them what silence had taught me. How to wait, how to document, how to survive without surrendering the truth. Sometimes, late at night, I thought about Daniel, not with anger, not even with sadness, but with clarity. I had loved him, truly, completely, and I had lost him the moment he chose power over honesty. That loss no longer hurt, because it had given me something greater in return, myself. I learned that love doesn't make you weak. Blind love does. I learned that revenge doesn't require cruelty. Sometimes it requires patience. And I learned that justice, imperfect as it is, still listens when you refuse to disappear. The war didn't end with medals or headlines. It ended quietly, the way real wars do, with one woman walking away intact. And for the first time in my life, not defined by rank, by uniform, or by someone else's ambition. I was free.